All right, good morning. We are, as usual, surprised in the book of Daniel. And it's been a long haul getting to this point in Daniel. And I was thinking that today, after many months of trying to get through Daniel verse by verse, I was thinking today we would finish it. Not even close. Not even close. I spent about 5 hours yesterday trying to decode Daniel, starting at chapter 11, verse, I think 16 onwards or 17 onwards. It took me 5 hours to get me from 17 to 35. And I'm going to try and present all of that to you in about 40 minutes. Unfortunately, it's not terribly exciting going through these passages. It really isn't. It is history. However, I did make a commitment to go through Daniel verse by verse, and this is what the Holy Spirit has written. And therefore, I'm going to go through it verse by verse. So while it's not terribly exciting, it will be useful for us. It is very information-packed. There is so much prophecy contained in that 18 verses that I was studying it yesterday and I couldn't believe it. I could not believe how much detail there is in 18 verses of the Bible that we usually just fly over. You know, they say the middle of America is flyover country. Those kind of flyover verses, we just kind of fly over it. We don't think about it. But when I started studying this, I was awestruck about how much is actually in here. So I'm going to try and share that with you. It's all history. And I asked myself, why is it that so much of prophecy is packed into this about 200 years of history? So much of prophecy is packed into this space. And I asked myself, why that would be? Why is this so important? It doesn't talk about the Savior. And yet there's prophecy after prophecy after prophecy coming at you like a machine gun. And I have a theory as to why that is, and I'll try to present that at the end. It's my personal theory of why there's so much prophecy packed into that space. We do have two visitors. Welcome. I apologize that, I'm starting right in the middle of I do apologize that you are catching the tail end of Daniel, but we have been going through the book of Daniel beginning to end, and this is roughly the outline of the book. The first book is Daniel being taken to Persia to Babylon as a teenager. Nebuchadnezzar's dream is chapter 2. The whole furnace incident is chapter 3. Number 4 is Nebuchadnezzar's pride. 5 is the fall of Babylon. 6 is the lion's den. 7 is Daniel's vision of the 4 beasts. So this is where the prophecies start. Number 8 is the ram and the he-goat. Number 9 is the 70 weeks. 10 is a glimpse of spiritual warfare. And today we are in the silent years. Just as way of background for those who haven't heard this before, Daniel is writing this around 600 BC. So when we read this passage, keep in mind that it was written in 600 BC. And it is speaking of 500 years of history future as if it was happening in front of Daniel's eyes. So when I show you things in history and then I show you the Bible verse, you'll see, oh, these match up. Okay, what's the big deal? What you should keep in mind when you read that is that the Bible verse that was written 600 years before the fact. And they don't just say broad events. Well, here, this will happen, this will happen. The details that are called out is simply awe-inspiring. So that's what you need to keep in mind. When we go through this dry history and the politics and the chicanery, it seems boring. But keep in mind that even the minor details were predicted 600 years in advance of the event actually happening. Okay, so we stopped here last week, so I'm going to start from here. Antiochus III had conquered Jerusalem, and he Ptolemy V in the south. So Antiochus was the king of the northern part of Syria. So we're talking all about Syria today. Syria was divided up among Alexander's generals. The northern half was Antiochus, the southern half was Ptolemy. Ptolemy ruled Egypt and all of those regions. And in Europe, we had Seleucus and the other general whose name I can't remember. But we're talking about Alexander's empire here. So the north is Antiochus, and the south is Ptolemy's, and these are the two empires that are kind of fighting each other at this time. We talked about how Antiochus offered his daughter Cleopatra in marriage to Ptolemy. Ptolemy V is about 10 years old at this time, and Antiochus III offers his daughter in marriage to this 10-year-old boy. The aim is so that once you get a family connection to Ptolemy, you can control Egypt. So that was the whole point here, right? But this is not the Cleopatra you're thinking about. This is not Antony and Cleopatra. This is another Cleopatra. But Cleopatra doesn't allow her father to control Egypt like her father wanted. Cleopatra remains faithful to her husband and to her empire that she's been married into. And so here is the verse that corresponds to it. And what I'm doing here, for those who haven't seen before, is that I'll list the history on the left side of the screen. And on the right side, I will show you the verses in the Bible. And I will point to you where history is directly pointing to what the Bible is saying, or it's actually backwards. The Bible is actually pointing to what the history is saying. And I've pointed this out to you. I'm not going to do it again. And I've color-coded it, and you can see how every single historical event points to a verse in the Bible that was written 600 years ago. So we've already gone through this. I'm not going to go through it again. We're going to start our discussion today right up about 190 BC. And at 190 BC, this is what the world that we are concerned with looks like. A couple of things you need to see here. In yellow is the Syrian Empire that we're talking about, right? This is after Alexander died, he divided his kingdom into four. On the top, on the north of that yellow area, you will see Seleucia, which is where Antiochus is. And in the south, you will see Ptolemy, which is Egypt, and all that's where Ptolemy is. In red, you will see Rome. And in purple, you'll see this empire called Carthage. I look for a map that was more contemporaneous to the time when I was trying to show you this. Really, in 190 BC, the map is a little bit accurate. Rome looks bigger than it is. It wasn't this big. Rome was just a small empire, just kind of flexing its muscle, kind of reaching out at that point. The big gorilla on the block was the purple one, Carthage. Carthage was the big empire at that time, along with the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. And Rome was just beginning to come upon the world stage. So this is the environment that we are talking about now. And remember, we're talking about 190 BC, but Daniel wrote about it in 600 BC. Okay, so always keep that in mind. And if you see to the left of Antioch, if you take your eyes to the left, you will see Athens and Greece. So Athens and Greece will also figure into our talk today. So this is what you need to keep in mind when we talk about the next couple of passages. Okay, so Antiochus III, who we talked about in the previous slide, what Antiochus III does at some point is that at 197 BC, he attacks Greece. So you see that yellow, he goes westward and he attacks Greece. Hannibal, who was the general of Carthage, persuades Antiochus to attack Rome. And Antiochus gives Hannibal a fraction of the resources he needs to attack Rome. So what's going on here? We all know about Hannibal, right? Hannibal was the great general of Carthage, of that big empire that we talked about. We all know about Hannibal crossing the Alps with the elephant. I think we've all heard that story. He wanted to attack Rome. Rome threatened Carthage, and Carthage was fighting back against Rome, and that's why Hannibal was attacking Rome. After many years of victories, Hannibal finally loses. Carthage starts losing its influence, and at some point, Rome just overruns Carthage and just flattens the place. So this is between the time Hannibal lost his battle and Rome overrunning Carthage. So Carthage is still an entity, but Hannibal has lost. So Hannibal sees Antiochus coming in from the east and attacking Greece, and he forms an alliance with Antiochus and says, hey, you know these other guys, Rome, they're the real threat to you, not Greece. You need to go attack him. So Hannibal has an axe to grind. He's protecting his own territory. But Antiochus III, he's not really impressed. He says, you know what? If I gave you armies to go attack Rome, you're going to get the glory. So I'll just give you a couple of ships. You can go do what you want. And Antiochus and Hannibal knew that's not sufficient. He kind of runs around in Rome for a while, comes back and says, you know what? Okay, I'm done. So this is kind of the summary of what happened with Hannibal and Antiochus. Daniel 11, verse 18. And today I'm reading from the Darby translation because a lot of things that Darby translated is more accurate than the King James that we are used to. So Daniel 11, starting from verse 18. And he shall turn his face into the isles and shall take many. But a captain for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. He shall turn it upon him without reproach for himself. He, who's he? He's talking, that's in the previous verse, talking about Antiochus III. He shall turn his face into the isles. If you look at that map to the west, you'll see Greece is actually a series of islands along with the mainland. So he shall turn his face to the isle, as Antiochus is going to attack Greece. But right after he attacks Greece, a captain for his own behalf, Hannibal, being allied with Antiochus, says, hey, we need to stop attacking Greece and we need to go attack Rome. And Antiochus doesn't really want to have anything to do with it. So he says, you know what, kind of brushes him off. And that's what you see here. Hannibal attacking Greece, it's in red. Antiochus attacking Greece in red. Hannibal persuading Antiochus and not getting what he wants and then coming back into himself, it's in green. Daniel 11:18. And this is how the whole thing is going to go today. It's going to be just one historical event after unhistorical event as to who cares. But that's what the verses are saying, and let's deal with it. And I think there's a reason why this is so detailed. So let's try and get through it as soon as we can. So Rome defeats Antiochus. So once Hannibal is done with his little expedition with Antiochus's resources, Antiochus says, you know what? Why should I give Hannibal all the glory, right? I'll go attack Rome myself. That doesn't go so well. Rome defeats Antiochus. We think of Rome as being this mighty empire, but keep in mind, but back then, Rome is just a city with a couple of villages around it. Antiochus rules an empire that's been in power for about 500 years. So Antiochus is a big gorilla on the block. Rome defeating him is kind of a big deal, right? So Rome defeats Antiochus. So Rome defeated Antiochus at Smyrna and demanded a huge payment that ruined him financially. Rome defeated Antiochus and said, you have to pay me. And this just bankrupted the empire. So what Antiochus does, he goes through his empire and starts looting the temples. Any temple, including the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, he starts looting it and starts taxing them. And during one of his looting campaigns, he dies. How, I don't know. I think he caught a disease or something and he dies. Seleucus Philopator succeed him. So Antiochus III, his time is over. Seleucus Philopator succeeds the throne, and he continues this aim of trying to raise funds because Rome has bankrupted them. So he starts taxing everybody and everything as hard as he can. His treasurer's name was Heliodorus. He sent Heliodorus to Jerusalem to collect taxes from the Jewish nation. Heliodorus collects the taxes from Jerusalem, comes back and kills his king, Seleucus, and he tries to take over the throne himself. Daniel 11:19. And he shall turn his face towards the fortresses of his own land, who? Antiochus III. And he shall stumble and fall and not be found. And in his place shall one stand up, who shall cause the exactor to pass through the glory of the kingdom, but in a few days shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. Pay attention to the details here. He shall turn his face toward the fortresses in his own land. What's he talking about? He's looting the temple. But he shall stumble and fall, and he shall not be found. He dies during one of those looting campaigns. And in his place shall one stand who shall cause the exactor is the taxman, to pass through the kingdom. This is Seleucus starting taxing all of the empire. Seleucus doesn't go looting, he starts taxing. So that's what the first part of Daniel 11 is talking about. But in a few days he shall be broken. What happens? Heliodorus comes back, kills Seleucus, and takes over the kingdom. So Seleucus loses his life, not in anger or in battle, but by betrayal. Details written 600 years before the fact, or 410, if you want to think about it. Next, after Heliodorus, this character called Antiochus IV comes in. When we come to Antiochus IV, you need to change your thinking a little bit. The Bible talks about the acts of Antiochus IV in great detail, but there's also a blurring between Antiochus IV, the king that has passed, and the Antichrist, the king that is future. In these verses, you'll see that blurring happening. You know, those who have artistic talents, you can relate to this, where sometimes you see art where there's two colors, and in between you do a blending, right? One color kind of fades into the other, and there's more and more of the second color, and then it's completely that second color. That's what you see with Antiochus IV when Daniel is dealing with it. Antiochus IV does various things, and Daniel calls it out, but the actions of Antiochus IV also points to a future king, that what we call the Antichrist. And you'll see this blurring, and I'll try to show you that as we go along. Antiochus IV was actually the brother of Antiochus III. He is not heir to the throne. Remember that Antiochus IV is not the legitimate heir to the throne. Antiochus III's son is the legitimate heir. But Antiochus IV is the adult, the other son is a child. So Antiochus IV comes and kills this tax collector who's sitting on the throne, Heliodorus, right? And he is known as Antiochus Epiphanes. If you know the name Epiphanes, this is Antiochus Epiphanes. I read somewhere that the Jews called him Antiochus Epimanes, which means madman, because this guy was a bad guy. This guy was just bad guy towards the Jewish people. So he was known as Epimanes by the Jewish people. Antiochus IV was not next in line for the throne. So what he did was he said, I'm going to be the guardian to Seleucus' son, because Seleucus' son is the next in line. So I'm the regent ruling in his stead. And he took power to the throne, and then he turned around and killed the son. So now he is sitting on the throne. Daniel 11, verse 21. And in his place shall stand up a vile person. Remember I said Epimanes? There it is. And in his place shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. He was not next in line to the throne. See, he is not given the honor of the kingdom. He's not supposed to have the kingdom. And then he poses as the regent. He says nice things. He takes the throne. He shall come peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. The next couple of slides, I'm just going to do history. The reason I'm doing this is because all of this history, there's about 3 pages of history. It's contained in just like one verse in Daniel. So I'm just going to go through some history. It's important for us to understand this. So I'm just going to try and hit these historical points as much as possible. I'm heavily indebted to some preachers who have gone before me that I rely heavily on, like Chuck Missler online. You can see his work on YouTube. But what I found was that for time or other reasons, some of these verses he kind of glosses over. And all of the resources that I have kind of glossed over a lot of this history. And I couldn't tease out all of the details. What I did was I just went to Wikipedia and I looked at the history of these kings and all of these people who lived in that time. And in the next couple of pages, you're just going to see Wikipedia entries. What I found, I can take the Wikipedia entry, put it on one side of the page. I can take the Bible prophecy, put it on the other side of the page, and they correspond one to one. I just want you to think about that for a second. The exactness of God's word. So let's go through the history. Most of this is from Wikipedia. So let's go through it. Antiochus IV, one of the first things he did was start persecuting the Jews. Understand, although the Seleucid Empire was ruling Israel, they were sympathetic to them. They said, have your own kingdom, have your own empire. We're not going to mess with you. Must give us taxes. Make sure you submit to us. And beyond that, we're okay. Antiochus completely reversed that. Antiochus IV specifically. He started persecuting the Jewish people. We'll talk about a couple of incidents that happened when Antiochus IV was in power. Around 175 BC, there was a Jewish man called Jason. I think the original word is Hassan, but it's anglicized to Jason. He was supposed to become high priest to the temple. He was next in line. But since Antiochus IV starts interfering in the Jewish way of things, Jason understood that he's not going to be high priest unless he buys off Antiochus. So he makes a deal, he makes a covenant with Antiochus that says, we will give you a payment of X amount, and in return, just let me be high priest, don't mess with us. And Antiochus says, okay, let's do that. In 171, what Jason does, he sends this guy named Menelaus to Antiochus that with payment, the agreed payment, he gives it to Menelaus and says, go give it to Antiochus. Menelaus has a better idea. He goes to Antiochus and says, you know what, here's the payment, but if you make me high priest, I'll give you more. This is the high priest we're talking about. So Antiochus said, yeah, sure, that's a better deal for me. So Antiochus sends his troops and he overthrows Jason, and Jason is deposed. So now Menelaus is the high priest. That's one event, okay? We'll draw a line there. And here's an unrelated event. In 168 BC, Antiochus sends a fleet to capture Egypt. This is unrelated to what's happening in Jerusalem, or so you think. Antiochus, when he comes to Egypt, this upstart called Rome sends one elderly statesman, just one, no army, nothing, just one elderly statesman called Gaius Popillius Laenas to meet him. And he tells Antiochus, if you invade Egypt, you will be at war with Rome. By this time, Rome is quite powerful, and Antiochus knows this. And Antiochus says, you know what, I'll think about it. What this elderly statesman is an old man, think about it, standing before this king. What this old man does, he takes a stick, he draws a line in the sand around Antiochus and says, if you leave the circle before giving me a decision, Rome is at war with you. And Antiochus caves because he understands the power of Rome by this point. And Antiochus caves. He is humiliated and he caves. He returns to his empire. Two unrelated events, right? Let's see how they connect together. News of Antiochus' defeat. Antiochus is defeated and it reaches Jerusalem, but the news is garbled on the way, right? It's like Chinese whispers. It gets garbled on the way. Somehow people in Jerusalem think that Antiochus has been killed. So Jason, who is now exiled from Jerusalem, Jason is supposed to be the high priest. Jason takes this as an opportunity. He takes 1,000 people, he invades Jerusalem, and Menelaus gets thrown out. So Jason captures Jerusalem. Antiochus, who's now back in his empire at this time, hears of what happened in Jerusalem. He misunderstands what happened. He thinks Jerusalem is in rebellion. It was just a dispute among the priests, but Antiochus misunderstands it. At this point, he's quite humiliated because of what happened in Egypt. So he needs to do something to establish his power. You know what he does? He invades Jerusalem and kills 40,000 people. Men, women, children, doesn't matter, kills all of them. He takes another 40,000 people and enslaves them. Jason flees the city and he dies in exile. You see how the two events that seem separate got connected together? Now, let's read. So I've summarized all of that history that I've given on the left side, and let's read the Bible verses. Daniel 11, verse 22. And the overflowing forces shall be overflowed from before him and shall be broken. yea, also the prince of the covenant. The 1,000-strong army, that is the overflowing forces that Jason brought in to capture Jerusalem, shall be overflowed from before him and shall be broken. That is Antiochus coming in and overflowing the overflowing army and capturing the city. Jason flees and dies in exile. Who's the prince of the covenant in this context? Jason is the one who made a covenant with Antiochus, remember? He's the prince of the covenant. And also the prince of the covenant shall fall. Here it is, all of about 100 years of history or 50 years of history summarized in one verse. The details is what you need to pay attention to. And there's a reason for this, and I hope to talk about that in the end. Now, this is the point at which the past and the future start to blur. We start talking a little more about Antiochus IV, but we start seeing hints of what is to come. Now, remember when Daniel wrote this, both events are future. Antiochus is in the future, and the Antichrist is in the future. From where we are standing today, Antiochus is in the past, and the Antichrist is in the future. And this part of the prophecy is when the two start to blur. Antiochus starts reflecting the king that is to come, and you see this blurring here. Daniel 11, verse 23, and after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, and he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. In time of peace shall he enter even into the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them prey and spoil and substance, and he shall plan his devices against the fortified places, even for a time. So as I told you, I tried to line up Wikipedia and history with the verses, and I didn't succeed here. I can point to you some of these things, but it seems like past history and future is blurring. So obviously I can't see the future. I can only speculate on it. So what I'll do with these verses, I'll try and speculate to you what it might be saying. 11:23, is this talking about breaking the covenant with Jason? Because he said he shall work deceitfully with him? Could be. Or is it talking about a future world leader that shall come from a small nation and will become the Antichrist? It could be that too. It means both things. It could mean one of those things. I can't tell. So this is where you see that blurring of past history with future history. Here again, is this talking about the destruction of Jerusalem? He shall enter the fattest places of the province. He's actually talking about Jerusalem. That's called the most desirable area. So is this verse talking about Jerusalem? Or is he talking about a future leader who is said will overrun Jerusalem? I can't tell because there are details here that doesn't match the past event. So I have to believe that some of this matches a future event. Now we come up to Ptolemy Six, and the end is in sight, people. We're getting through a lot of history. Bear with me. Ptolemy Six, now Antiochus and Seleucus and all of these guys, remember, are in the northern part of the Syrian Empire. In the south, the Ptolemies are still ruling. So Ptolemy Six is in charge now in the south of Syria. This is straight out of Wikipedia. You can see this if you're so interested. The Sixth Syrian War broke out in 169 BC. The Ptolemaic army went and tried to invade Palestine, but Antiochus IV from the north counters them. So Ptolemy is trying to get Palestine. Antiochus meets him and defeats him. So Antiochus defeats Ptolemy, and Antiochus now controls Ptolemy. If you remember the past history, you will see that the north has been trying to control Egypt for a long time, because Egypt is incredibly fertile. Remember, back in the day, all your wealth comes from agriculture. So the country that has the most agriculture is simply the wealthiest country possible. So the north has been trying to control the south for a long time, and they never succeeded. Finally, he does. Antiochus IV finally conquers Ptolemy the Sixth during the skirmish. Daniel 11, verse 25. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall engage in battle with an exceeding great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall plan devices against him. The Ptolemaic army is the king of the south. He is intercepted by Antiochus IV. he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south. That's the Antiochus's army. And they defeated, Ptolemy the Sixth is defeated, and he shall not stand. And why does he not stand? The last part of the verse. For they shall plan devices against him. What's he talking about? There's more history. One of Ptolemy's friends, what he tries to do, Euleus, his name is, he gives the entire treasury, Ptolemy's treasury, to his hands, and he tries to evacuate Ptolemy the Sixth to an island called Samothrace. So basically, you can rule from Samothrace, and I'll hold off Antiochus here. But before he could happen, two of Ptolemy's generals double-cross him. They launched a military coup and took control of the Egyptian government. So Ptolemy is trying to hold it together, but there are devices being made against him. And that's what we saw in the previous verses. Daniel 11:26, and they that eat of his delicate food shall break him, and his army shall be dissolved, and many shall fall down slain. And there it is. They that eat of his delicate food, that means somebody who is right next to him in his table. His generals, that's where he plans everything. Generals are right next to him. They double cross him. There is a military coup, and they overthrow, and Ptolemy is not able to stand. Antiochus IV advances on Alexandria. Ptolemy the Sixth went out to meet him, because now it's not enough that Ptolemy is defeated. Antiochus is saying, I'm taking Alexandria. So he marches on Alexandria. Ptolemy the Sixth meets him. They negotiate, rather than have a war, they negotiate friendship. And Ptolemy the Sixth became a vassal, kind of a puppet king to Antiochus. So this is how Antiochus takes over Egypt. Daniel 11:27, and both these kings' hearts shall meditate mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper. For yet the end shall be at the time appointed. And here it is, they're negotiating, they're trying to come to an agreement, but it's just lies. This one wants to control the other, and that's all it is. Boy, there's a lot here. So here, Antiochus is coming back for a second time. So Antiochus comes back to his empire after he's conquered Egypt. Ptolemy the Eighth at this time, who is Ptolemy the Sixth, the next in line, overthrows Ptolemy the Sixth. This is very complicated. Ptolemy the Sixth, he flees to Cyprus. Within 2 months, all of these guys, all of the Ptolemies and all the Cleopatras, they all kind of make up and they all come back and start ruling the southern kingdom all by themselves. Now that they've come back and made up with each other, they say, you know what? We don't need Antiochus IV anymore. I'm not going to pay him taxes anymore. So what happens is Antiochus says, you know what? I'll teach you a lesson. I'm going to come back and I'm going to invade you again. So he comes back and invades the empire again. Well, this time, the Ptolemies run to Rome and say, hey, look, Antiochus is invading us. Can you please help? And Rome comes back and tells Antiochus, no, you can't do this. And Antiochus is defeated again. Daniel 11:28, and he shall return into his land with great substance. And Antiochus returning the first time. And at the set time he shall return, which is Antiochus returning the second time, but not as the former time shall be the latter. Why is that? And for the ships of Chittim shall come up against him, and he shall be grieved and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant. And he will practice, and he shall return and direct his attention to those that forsake the holy covenant. The ships of Chittim is Cyprus. That's where the Roman navy was based. So he comes back in victory. He has to go back to invade again, but this time is not like the last time. Rome is coming up against him, the ships of Chittim, and he's defeated. And what does he do? He shall direct his attention to those that forsake the holy covenant, and his indignation against the holy covenant. I mean, what he's doing, he takes out his anger on Israel. Israel is always a scapegoat. Here's the things that Antiochus did, because he got defeated in Egypt twice by the Romans. He's angry. He's taking it out on Egypt. Here's the things that he did. He made reading the Torah a crime. He slaughtered a pig on the altar at Jerusalem. You know how that went. And that wasn't enough. He erected an idol in the hole of to Zeus, in the Holy of Holies. He did this. Daniel 11:31. And forces shall stand on his part, and they shall profane the sanctuary, the fortress, and shall take away the continual sacrifice. And they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Remember this verse, the abomination that makes desolate. What's it talking about? The abomination is the abomination is slaughtering a pig on the altar. Okay, that's bad enough. But the abomination that makes desolate is taking another God and putting it in this Holy of Holies. Jesus Christ points to this phrase and says, this will happen again. This will happen again, and know that that is the end time. Here's another thing that you need to know. After Antiochus did this, other rulers have tried. Nero tried to have his image erected in the Holy of Holies. The general who's ruling Israel at the time says, I'm not going to do it, because if I do that, this whole country will be up in uproar against me. I can't handle it. So he refuses. Nero hears about his refusal and sends orders to have this general executed. Well, messages being what they are, carried by hand, it didn't get there. This execution order didn't get there on time. And in the meanwhile, Nero dies. And the news of his death comes to Jerusalem before the order for the general to be executed comes there. In other words, what I'm trying to tell you is that after Antiochus, others have tried to make the holy place desolate, but God stepped in and stopped it. Why? Because the time is not right. Antiochus was allowed to do this because it is a marker in history. And when you read Revelation and when you read the prophecies that Jesus himself told James and John, he refers to this. So this is a marker. He allows Antiochus to do it. He won't allow anyone else to do it. And in 70 AD, the temple was burned down. So it's not going to happen until the temple is rebuilt again. We know the temple is going to be rebuilt again because Jesus says there's going to be an abomination that makes desolate, that in order for that to happen, there has to be a temple. So we know the Jewish temple is going to be built again, and it's based on this. So what happens is after this, the Jews are extremely angry. They start revolting against the Seleucids. This group called the Maccabees rise up in Israel. This is the book of the Maccabees. The Catholic Church has this in their Bible. We don't. But the Maccabees rise up against Antiochus. The war raged for 3 years. The Maccabees won. The rededication of the temple after the Maccabees won is what we call today Hanukkah. This is Hanukkah. And after this came the Hasmoneans, who ruled Jerusalem all the way to Rome. The Hasmoneans was overthrown by a guy we know named Herod. And Herod was a puppet for Rome. So between this time and Herod is the Hasmoneans, and it was brought about by the Maccabees. Daniel 11:32, and such as do wickedly against a covenant shall pervert by flatteries, but the people that know their God shall be strong. I believe this is talking about the Maccabees. Perhaps it could also be talking about a future event. And this is where I can't tell, because I can't tell the future. And 33, and they that are wise among the people shall instruct the many, and they shall fall by the sword, by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. The war raged for 3 years. And when they fall, they shall be helped with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of the wise shall fall, to try them, and to purge, to make them white, and to the end of the time, and it shall be yet for the time appointed. Again, here is where it starts getting blurry. He's talking about past events, and he's also talking about a future, where the Antichrist shall take over by flatteries. So here's the history laid out for you at this point. This is where we're going to stop. I'm just going to read 11:36 and we're going to stop. And the king shall do, this is the next verse, and the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and speak monstrous things against God of gods. And he shall prosper until the nation be accomplished, for that which is determined shall be done. The one signature of the Antichrist is that he is big, he is Mr. Big Mouth. If you see a politician who seduces you with big words, watch out. See, we think the Antichrist is going to come over and with an army and take over and with the big military. No, he's going to take you over with his words. Many are going to willingly submit to him. He is known as Mr. Big Mouth. He has many titles, but the one that keeps getting repeated over and over is that he is Mr. Big Mouth. And at some point, once he consolidates his control, he's going to say, I am God. There is no God above me. And I mean no God. He's not going to honor the God of the Hindus or the God of the Muslims, or definitely not the God of the Bible. He will say, I am God, and he's going to take over by flatteries. And he's who we have to deal with in the next couple of verses and all through the chapter 12. I always like to end with this. I always like to read Isaiah 46 when we ask this question, why prophecy? Why bother? Who cares, right? It says here, Isaiah 46 verse 8, remember this and show yourself men. Recall to mind, O you transgressors. Remember the former things of old, for I am God. This is God defending himself, which is quite an awesome thought, right? Why would God bother defending himself? Why would he care about what we thought, what we think about him? But he does. This is God saying, I am God. For I am God. There is no other. I am God. There is none like me. And here's the verse that's important. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times, things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. So why prophecy? He's authenticating himself. No one else can declare the end from the beginning except for God. The devil cannot, the angels cannot, only God can. So he puts prophecy in the Bible to show you, I am God. When I say something, you can count on it. So I promised you that I will try and give you an opinion as to why these couple of verses are so dense with prophecy. I heard someone say that chapter 11 has 135 prophecies in it. 135 prophecies pointing to specific events. And I'm sure all of you are glad I didn't call out all 135, but I call out enough to be boring, right? But there are 135 prophecies. Why? Because of this one reason. This is my opinion. At the time of Antiochus II, which is about 200 years before the fact, the book of Daniel was translated into Greek, and it was widely circulated. Everybody knew this book existed. Guess what happens? Right after that time period, the density of prophecies increases. Every single political event after that date is detailed to you in great detail. Why? Because there is no way you can come and dispute to me that the book of Daniel was written after the fact. That is an argument that scholars make today. They can't deny that the prophecy is accurate. So what do you do? You attack it by saying, well, somebody wrote it before the fact. You can't do that. Because the Greek translation, the Septuagint translation, was in wide circulation. It was well known, and God goes, watch this. I'm going to call out the next 200 years of history in great detail so that you will know that I am God and I call the shots. And that's what we need to rely on. Let's pray. Our most loving Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that you gave us that we could look at the book of Daniel. We thank you because you are God and you are in control. Nothing that affects us is really to concern us because you are the one in charge. Thank you for this time. Thank you for the worship this morning. And until we meet again, God bless us and send us on our way. We ask all of these things in the name of our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ.